All right, so I'm going to talk about how to contribute to brackets, or more specifically, how to make sure that your contribution is accepted into brackets. And my name is Glenn Ruley, and I'm an engineer on the brackets team. So one of the first and most important things is to let us know what you're working on. And you can do this by shouting out to our IRC channel, brackets on Freenode, sending a message to our brackets dev Google group, or even if it's just a bug, make sure you put a comment in the bug. And this is important for three reasons. First one is to avoid collisions. We want to make sure that we don't have multiple people working on the same thing at the same time. Another one is to get some tips, even if it's something that we haven't started working on yet. Most of the things, there's someone on the team that already has some thoughts about it, maybe has some gotchas, some considerations, and just, it'd be good to get those heard first. And then finally, it's about understanding priority. Everything in our backlog is something that we do plan on getting to eventually. But if you decide to work on something that's a really big feature, well, it may take a little while before we're ready to get it in and merged into brackets. And so, if you'd let us know what you're working on early, we can have these conversations up front so you don't go on, work on your own for a few weeks, submit something to brackets, and hear, well, we can't really pull that in for a while. So Ty's already gone over how to get all the code from Git and how to make changes. Peter's talked about the architecture and those kinds of things. And here I just want to go over a few more things, really polish on your code to make sure that it will get contributed, to make sure that that process is smoothed over. And the first one is we have some coding conventions. These are all noted on our wiki, and I'll just go ahead and pull them up here. For the most part, they're pretty straightforward. We use spaces instead of tabs. We use modules, as Peter pointed out. We have some naming conventions, and of course, the very important one, semicolons. Use them. So I'm not going to go through this in too much detail, but I will just say that, this is a wiki page that's up to date on our wiki, and so read it and look through it. And also note that this is really all a work in progress. If as we start developing new coding conventions, we're going to be adding them there. If there's something that you really feel like you disagree with, let us know, unless it's semicolons, of course. Those are always going to be in. And talk to us about these. Next thing, JSLint. I know this has been mentioned in, I think, every single person that's talked so far. And yes, we do use JSLint, and we use it to validate our own code, because as anybody who's spent any time in JavaScript knows, there's really very, very few safety nets out there, and it's easy to just completely have things go haywire. And JSLint is something that does provide a level of one level of protection in your code. And the nice thing is if you develop brackets within brackets, we have JSLint built in, and it will tell you right away when things are wrong. And so that is really convenient there. We use JSLint both for linting and for format checking right now. And so if you're writing a new file, what you should do is just start with our defaults from one of our existing files. Those are the defaults that we have up there, if you can read them. They're also up on our Coding Conventions webpage. And every once in a while, you may find yourself wanting to change one of the settings in there. As long as it's not white space, you might want to just throw it up on the IRC channel or something that you might want to, what you want to add, and that's pretty much allowable. So for example, if you want to allow the insecure dots and regular expressions, that's kind of a one that, if on a case-by-case basis, we'll let those in. Next up, talk about testing your code. So you've written great code, it passes JSLint. Well, how are you going to make sure that it's high quality and you don't end up on fail road? We have unit tests. Brackets unit tests are all written using Jasmine. They're found in the brackets repo under brackets test spec. And you can run them from brackets themselves. In the debug menu, there's a run test menu item. So unit tests need to be added for all model code, all model and basically controller code. That's stuff like that, file access, anything like that. Unit tests need to be added for that. And for UI code, add unit tests wherever possible. And in this case, what we do is we take the approach of treating the DOM as the model. So we don't use bitmap captures and that kind of stuff in our unit tests. What we'll do is we'll write a unit test and we'll kind of peek at the DOM and say, hey, are these nodes in there that I expect to have in there? And that's the way that we do those. So let's go ahead and take a look at a couple of our unit tests. The first one is one for testing our key maps. And in this case, obviously a key map is something that's very model driven. And again here, our unit tests use JSLint. There's a lot more global stuff in there to define all of the Jasmine globals that are in there. And it's also written as a module, again following the conventions that Peter showed earlier. And if for Jasmine, the way it basically works is you describe a set of tests. You're saying, here, I'm describing my key map tests, and then you have a series of tests within there. So the Jasmine uses a convention of an it function. So it should normalize keyboard modifiers, and you basically build up some tests and run them, and then use standard assertions to say, hey, is something equal or not equal, etc. And there are ways of having code that gets run before each test or after each test. For another example, we can look at the working view tests. So here's one that's testing UI. And most of the time when you're testing UI, what you're going to need to do is create an actual instance of a brackets window to run in. And we have some utility functions for that. So we have this create test window and run. And so what that'll do is that'll create another instance of a brackets window, loading it up with whatever you specify in here. You generally run your tests on that and then close the window. That way you're always working in a clean environment. And in here, so this one, it's running some tests, and here it's looking at the DOM here. So it's expecting to find the first A tag to have the text of file1.js. Really loose DOM testing here, and ideally what you want to do is make those as permissive as possible, not really brittle, not looking for very specific DOM structure, but looking for something that is somewhat of a descendant of something else, just enough to verify that what is you expect to see in the UI should be there. And then, so to run tests, you just, as I said, you do the debug run tests. Right now it takes about 1.5 minutes to run all of the unit tests. It's not too bad. So beyond the unit tests, because unit tests are great for testing, the level stuff, the model code, the file IO code, and all of that stuff, but you also need some level of functional testing. And we have a set of smoke tests, again, posted to our wiki. And this is it's a fairly short set. I mean, it's an eye chart, but it fits on one screen if you use a small font like that. It takes, we want to make sure that these run in less than 5 minutes. And what this is all about is exercising all of the main parts of the UI and exercising the areas that we've found in the past to be fragile. So, making sure that shadows aren't drawn on top of menu items, making sure that as you resize things, you don't get any odd flickers or any weird redraws. So really this smoke test here is all about the UI sanity testing here. And so another thing is scenario testing. That gets, real easy when you're focused on your feature. You're just really in there working on it and testing it and making sure that it's working in isolation in the way that you're testing it. Think outside the box. Think of different ways of using it. Think of different ways of the way your feature is integrated. You might even want to get other people to test your code for you. Put up a, post your push your code to your repo and have somebody else pull it down and test it out. That help find bugs before they, help find bugs early, and then also having other people who will probably use the feature in different ways test it out. And then if you're doing anything that works with native system calls, file I/O, file dialogues, anything like that, really make sure it gets tested on both Mac and Windows. If you don't have both of those available to you, send a note, find somebody who has the other one, and let them test it out. All right, so before you can get a pull request submitted, you need to accept the contributor license agreement. And most contributor license agreements, it's step one, hire a lawyer to go through all of the pages of the doc and all of that. Well, not here. No, we have a very, very simple contributor license agreement. Again, this is linked from our wiki. It is a live web page, and that is the entire text of the whole thing. Basically what it's saying is, as Adam mentioned earlier, Brackets itself is an MIT license, and it's a very permissive license. What this is saying here are two things. Number one, that you're allowing the code that you're submitting to be submitted under that same very permissive license. And number two, that you actually have the rights to be submitting all of this code that you're submitting. It's not something that you stole from somewhere else and that you're submitting. And to sign it, all you have to do is come to this form, fill out these things, click the accept button. That's it. Very simple. And that is what I have for now. Do you guys have any questions?
Yeah, so I have a general question, and
Yes.
actually it's not specific for you. For how, so we're taking a bunch of, we've had a bunch of external pull requests, we've started accepting them. How are we making sure that people sign the CLA before we take those? Are we doing that yet?
Yeah, so the question was, how are we making sure that people are signing the CLA before we do the pull request? Well, on the engineering team, we ask Adam to make sure that it's we have a pull request from that person, or a CLA from that person. Yes.
Has that been happening? Okay.
Yeah, and the CLA, I'm not Mike, but the CLA is online, so all you have to do is go and fill out your information. We generate a PDF so we can sort for later, and then you're good to go forever.
Okay.
Yeah, as Adam said, the CLA is online, as I just showed on that web page, and when you hit the accept button, we have a PDF that is stored internally, and so yeah, you're good forever.